This is where it happens. Long hikes with friends, kayaking adventures with family, more horseback riding, zipline gliding, rock face climbing, hammock camping fun than you could ever imagine. And it's all outdoors, amongst the trees and across the prairie, here beneath Nebraska skies. Plan an outing today at yournebraskaadventure.com. Sponsored by Nebraska Game and Parks, aired with the Nebraska Broadcasters Association and this station.
All right, welcome in to the Husker Basketball Postgame Show. Harrison Arns back here at 1040 O Street on the corner here at the Ticket Studios. We got some hoops to talk about. Huskers come out with another win, finishing the non-con schedule with only one loss. First time that's happened since all the way you have to go back to World War II. Caught that at the end of the game there. They beat the Southern Jaguars. It was one of those games where you're looking at Nebraska, and the goal is just take care of business. You're a madman if you're betting for the Huskers to lose, or you're a rich man. The spread was 21.5 before tip off on most sites. Looking at ESPN is where they left off at. And we're going to dive into the Huskers not only covering the spread, but very early on, just put the Southern Jaguars in quite a tight spot. Before we get there, though, I want to shout out our sponsors. Shout out Action Plumbing, Heating, AC, Electrical, and Lincoln Wall to Wall Wine and Spirits. And you haven't been there, check it out. Wall to Wall Wine and Spirits here in Lincoln. They got every selection you can possibly imagine. Aisles go for days on all the types of beverages you can get. All right, let's go ahead and dive into it. Final score of this one: Nebraska Cornhuskers win it 77-43. Again, kind of covering that spread with ease. And really in that second half, I don't want to say Nebraska played horrible. I think what happened in that second half, especially down late when there was only 10, 12 minutes left in the game, you saw kind of a relaxed version of Nebraska, and you saw quite a few turnovers for it. But they do end up winning it. The spread was far too great at that point for Southern to really overcome. So 77-43. Like I said, Nebraska turnovers in that second half. We'll talk about it, but really that first half was clean. The real stories for Nebraska: Connor Segan continues to be Connor Segan. He had a great year that first year over at Wisconsin. Second year, call it a slump, call it, Wisconsin just got some different guards in there that they really like to utilize, Storm being one of them. But he's really found a home here in Nebraska, and he's on track right now, shooting the best numbers he has in his entire collegiate career. So Connor Segan for the night, give you his stats here. He was 6 for 12, all 12 shots, 3-pointers. He also was 2 for 3 from the stripe, and he gets to a total of 20 points, 6 rebounds on the day as well, but then 3 turnovers, and we'll go through the turnover bugs on a lot of these guys. Otherwise, it was a pretty just good all-around performance. Andrew Morgan, you get 10 from him. Williams early on gives you, I think, the first 7 points, and then the rest of the team starts to chip in, start contributing. But Bryce Williams is really the guy to get things going. He finishes with 11 points, 7 rebounds as well, 4 assists and a steal. Unfortunately for Williams, 5 turnovers. Probably want to get that one lower. Braxton Meehan chips in for 3. Juwan Gary with 9. Burke Bear-Uchtengel with 6 points. And Wooster comes in. Not Wooster. Wooster starts with 8 points, but the guy who does come in, Gavin Griffiths, actually finished with 8 points as well. Kind of got his time. You call it garbage time, but it was good to see Gavin Griffiths get that opportunity. The last time he played, you have to go all the way back in the calendar to December 7th. So for a guy like Gavin Griffiths, who highly touted coming out of high school, really hasn't probably had the collegiate start that he thought he would since coming out of high school. So I think it was just good to see him go out there, not only, score, but hit a couple of threes, and then a nice drive inside to finish on an easy 2-point layup. I think it was just good for a guy like that to get their confidence, because we've seen it before, especially when you get to those tighter games in the season. NBA, you always kind of think about him. It's those, not necessarily your star player, but it's one of those role players where you might not need it every game, but there's going to be one of those opportunities where you just need to look down the bench and have an answer. And at least with Gavin Griffiths and that sliver you saw, the guy could shoot. He's ridiculously tall. I believe he's sitting there at almost 6'7", 6'9" between there. He's got a great wingspan. Ball handling, it's not the cream of the crop, but it's certainly good enough to get the job done. So to see him finish the game, 2 big threes, gets up, easy layup as well. That's just big for a guy like that to get confidence. It doesn't mean that his minutes are going to tick up significantly from here on out, but he did show something. That confidence is still there. And then if Hoiberg really needs a guy, in one of those crucial scenarios, and for whatever reason the starting five doesn't have it, maybe the first two off the bench have it. It was good to see Gavin Griffiths have that moment. Looks like we do got Austin Orman joining us, the man who was down there at Pinnacle Bank Arena. Let's go ahead and bring him in. Like I said, Austin Orman, I know you were at the game live. I got to watch it back here at the Ticket Studios. It was pretty much what we thought. A little sloppy in the second half. The Huskers maybe relaxed a little bit too much, but the damage was done, and the Huskers cruise comfortably to another win.
That they did. It reminded me a lot of the Murray State game, Harrison, where Nebraska led 34-14 at halftime. Today it was 39-15. And then Nebraska actually won the second half of this game, unlike against Murray State when the Racers won that second half by 3. Nebraska wins this second half of the game. I heard you at the very end there mention just how sloppy it got in the second half. 4 turnovers in the first half for Nebraska, 10 in the second. That's too many. That's not going to get it done, especially for a team that wants to, finish strong, especially on its home court. So no, not the prettiest performance, but like you said, hay was in the barn already. Nebraska did enough. And that was one of the things that I said was one of my 3 big keys to the game, Harrison, was getting off to a fast start. This is a team in Southern that had a double-digit lead on a top 20 Texas A&M team that played Mississippi State tough and hung with Iowa even. So this is not a team Nebraska could afford to allow to hang around. The Huskers didn't do that. They dominated this game pretty much from the jump. And that's really what this team needed going into one of the biggest games of the year coming up against UCLA. Good balanced effort. There wasn't, there were some standout performances here and there, but a lot of people contributed for Nebraska in a lot of different ways. And it was just a very good take care of business win to move Nebraska's record to 11-2 and wrap up the non-conference that way.
Yeah, Nebraska is getting to this point with the basketball program where, yes, you get a game like the Southern Jaguars coming to your home court. We're just at a point in this program where those are games you kind of do have to dominate. Nobody feels good about that one unless it's a strong performance, and Nebraska kind of walks out of it comfortably. The turnovers, though, is always the thing that's going to worry me. When they really lock in on it and focus, like you saw in that first half, not only does it good for you, I mean, you get more possessions, you're not giving them away. Also, when you're playing a team like Southern, they live off that stuff. And we saw what happens when you're not going to give it to them. When you got UCLA coming down the pipeline here pretty soon, that's a team that also really thrives on getting turnovers and converting in transition. That was really the only good offense from Southern all night. Was in the second half, transition points where they got to really showcase their athleticism. For me, that's kind of the only nitpick thing I'd really got to walk away from this one. And it's kind of been that trend all year. This Husker team is going to be really good, but we have yet to see it's not that it's not an explosive offense, but they do play a style where taking care of that ball is going to be really, really valuable. They're going to take their time. They're going to limit possessions in a game because they're not just going to go up and down. But if you're going to play that way, you got to take care of the basketball. That's the only real nitpick thing I got. Other than that, yeah, standout performances.
Before you go on to that, I would say, the turnovers are going to be an issue for Nebraska that Fred Hoiberg thought he would have solved with a guy like Raleigh Wooster coming over and running point. A lot of them happened with either Raleigh Wooster off the floor, not in control of the ball. I mean, you go up and down the Nebraska lineup, 2 turnovers from Braxton Mia. Both of them were probably preventable with either a better pass that led to the turnover or not bringing the ball down. I mean, Bryce Williams had 5 turnovers. A couple of them just lost the handle. One of them he fell down on. That was one of the knocks on him and his handle, is that it's a little loose. It's a little far out there. He can get stripped from time to time. You have Connor Esijan with 3 turnovers as well. And what Southern did in some of those situations, and what other Big Ten teams will do moving forward, is they will make guys like Connor Esijan and Braxton Mia, maybe Andrew Morgan, even Juwan Gary to some degree, handle the ball, right? Bryce Williams won't have 5 turnovers very often. Raleigh Wooster did a pretty good job taking care of the ball. 6 assists and no turnovers tonight. Those are guys that Nebraska wants to have handle the ball. But if other teams are smart, they will align their defense and set it up in such a way as to make Connor Essegian create off the dribble where he's not nearly as comfortable. When Sam Hoiberg's in the game, they're more than okay with Sam Hoiberg going into the paint at 6'1", right? He had a nice little wraparound pass late in the game, but Big Ten teams aren't necessarily scared of Sam Hoiberg driving in the lane, jump stocking, playing off 2 feet. They can swarm him with length. And that's not to pick on Sam, right? He's doing his job. It's fine. But it's just the shortcoming, the area that Nebraska is going to need to watch out for. And the other one, Harrison, is an issue that hadn't really popped up since Michigan State. Yeah, that's really been the only time, was the rebounding. Nebraska wins the rebounding battle by 9 tonight, 48-39. It dominate the defensive glass. 40 defensive rebounds for Nebraska, except they really didn't dominate it. Southern had 17 offensive rebounds, 17 of them. And that led to 12 second chance points. So you add up 20 points total off of second chances and turnovers. It was a weird performance because some of them were long rebounds. Southern was missing pretty wildly on some threes. So sure, you give up a couple of them, but others were three, maybe 4 guys chasing a block shot. None of them got it, which allowed Nebraska no one else rebounding, right? One guy maybe checking out on the perimeter. So the ball's just kind of bouncing around in the middle of the paint. Southern would get it and stick it back in generally. Nebraska's length prevented maybe a few more second chance points just because guys were decently quick to recover. And it's things that, okay, yeah, it's against Southern, a lesser opponent that you were dominating. And that second group, Fred Hoiberg, or not even the second group, the last group of the game, Fred Hoiberg commented on specifically saying that they played the game the right way. They finished out strong. They weren't just jacking up shots in a blowout. And you can get away with it against Southern, playing that way, chasing block shots and stats when you're up the way Nebraska is. But you can tell Fred Hoiberg wasn't necessarily pleased with it because it wasn't fundamental basketball. It's kind of stat chasing and big play chasing, which is something Nebraska avoided for the most part when it was on its runs.
Yeah, and I think Nebraska, Bryce Williams could have had a moment where he starts going stat chasing right at the beginning of the game. He looked like the MVP that we saw at the Diamond Hand Classic right out of the gates there. And you give credit to him. Really, this whole team, they do a good job of, when they're on, they don't overexert themselves and throw the entire offense out of sync with them. Like Connor Essegian, Bryce Williams, Juwan Gary, it doesn't really seem to matter who's got the hot hand. They're always going to take that better shot. You'll see Bryce Williams use his hot hand to set up others. I just think with the rebounding, that one's, again, the second half is so hard to judge because there was, between the turnovers and rebounding, it just felt like the Huskers were relaxing a little bit too much. But you're right. The Michigan State game, they certainly weren't relaxed. They were trying to get rebounds, but they were just getting out rebounded badly. Southern, they took 24 threes. Yeah, some of them bounced out really far, especially when they only made 3 of them. You can imagine most of those shots weren't necessarily in and out. Pretty bad misses from time to time. But at the same time, it's just that second half relax, because there's going to be situations where, say you are playing a UCLA and you are beating them pretty comfortably. 20 points to UCLA is a much smaller mountain than 20 points is to Southern. And those are moments you can kind of slip up there, and those teams will come back. Because, again, I kind of look at that, Andrew Morgan practicing being long snapper for a little bit there. Like, you're not going to see that in a game versus Michigan State when they're only up by 3 or 2. You're probably going to see him just hand it off or, make sure there's a guy back there.
You will. And here's the thing. If Nebraska ever gets up by 20 against UCLA, I will probably keel over dead in my seat. This is an incredible UCLA team, and I can't wait to talk more about this game as it goes on. I think maybe the relevant example here, Harrison, is Indiana. Nebraska starts the game off on that huge run, hitting multiple threes, getting to the rim almost at will, capped by the one from Berke Boyiktanjel on the offense's right wing on the far basket there. And then what did Nebraska do? Got a little sloppy, turned the ball over, made some unnecessary passes in traffic. Indiana's right back in it. Indiana actually took the lead at a couple different points in the first half. Nebraska would lead at half and then pull away kind of the midpoint of the second half. So even against an Indiana team that is certainly talented, maybe as talented as UCLA, I prefer UCLA's roster construction and coaching to Indiana's, but even if that's just an average Big Ten team that goes 10-10 in the league in Indiana, you watch an 11-point lead, like a 13-3, 10-point lead, somewhere in that neighborhood, double digits by any stretch of the imagination, though. You let that evaporate really quickly because you didn't take care of the ball. You maybe got too caught up in the moment thinking, oh, we're on easy mode, we're fine, which, again, you can overcome. It's a veteran Nebraska team, and they found a way to stabilize it. But to your point, if it's UCLA, if it's when you go on the road to Iowa here coming up soon, follow that up with a road trip to Purdue, an arena Nebraska's never won in. And then even Rutgers, who has maybe the best player in the Big Ten and freshman Dylan Harper, and another guy that's in consideration to go at least in the lottery, if not the top 5, Ace Bailey. Those guys can make deficits disappear in a hurry because they're just good basketball players. So the lesson from tonight is Nebraska did enough. It kind of felt like the Colorado game in football. Get out to the big leads, you just kind of coast. Southern got its points like Colorado got its points. Nebraska was never in any serious jeopardy, but man, killer instinct is something that the football team has to work on developing. And the basketball team, I trust a little bit more to do that, but you can always get better at it.
Absolutely. And before we throw it to break here, we'll have one break, then we'll come back and do another segment here. But before we go to break here, just final thoughts on this one. Anything you heard at the press conferences afterward that we can kind of tease, and then we'll dive into that on that second half. Maybe we lost Austin.
No, we're good. There's a blip. Sorry, and it was right at the end of your question. Didn't want to jump in and cut you off in case I missed it. It was a lot of good team win. It was a lot of, hey, way to find the hot hand. Guys aren't overplaying necessarily. And Fred Hoiberg, I think the jumping off point for this, Harrison, can be the culture. There's some interesting game notes from Seamus McKnight, the SID. And I think that the culture in Nebraska being 11-2 overall and 10-1 in the non-conference is a great step in the right direction for this program.
Yeah, absolutely. And I heard on the broadcast, it was actually the first time, you have to go back all the way to World War II. This is the first time since Nebraska's gone at least through the non-con schedule with only one loss. So it is another mark of improvement. Yeah, you can argue about the competition up to this point, but I mean, we've seen this team lose to weak competition in years prior. So it's good to see them continue to take steps in that direction. All right, we'll throw to one break here. We'll come back for another segment. This is the Nebraska basketball post-game show. Again, want to shout out our sponsors, Wall to Wall Wine and Spirits, Action Plumbing, and then Heating, AC, and Electrical. Shout out to those guys for sponsoring, allowing us to bring you this content. We'll throw it to break. 402-464-5685. I encourage you guys to join in. This is the post-game show. Talk to you in a little bit.
Give yourself the ultimate gift, self-care and peace of mind. We know the holidays can bring stress, but did you know that managing that stress is key to your heart health? High blood pressure and heart disease can be impacted during this busy time. In fact, heart attacks are more common during the holidays. So take a moment for yourself. Breathe, relax, and prioritize your well-being. Search Chronic Disease Nebraska to learn more. Paid for by Nebraska DHHS, aired with the Nebraska Broadcasters Association and this station.
Early break. He brings him in and teaches him how to be Santa Claus.
So what do you do if like a 16-year-old wants to sit on the lap? What do you do? There's a protocol.
Protocol. What do we do? How do we handle it? Oh, not
you
so
stand.
fast.
Yeah.
This is crazy. I'm going to stand up next to you.
Clause would not approve. Right.
Bunch of college girls.
Right. No. Oh, it becomes no.
Early break from 6 to 8 every weekday morning on 93.7 The Ticket.
Mario fue pintor más de 30 años. Cuando me dijo que se le estaban olvidando las cosas, fue difícil. Un día me dijeron que pintara el marco del lado por dentro y pinté el lado de afuera.
Yo le diría a la gente que le diga a su familia lo que está pasando con él.
Si algo se nota diferente, podría ser Alzheimer. Es momento de hablarlo. Visita alz.org/nuestras historias para saber más. Un mensaje de the Alzheimer's Association y the Ad Council.
Dance like a dad. It's a great way to make a moment with your kids. First, I hold my hands out like they're on a steering wheel. Then I look over my shoulder. Next, I put it in reverse. Visit fatherhood.gov. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
In every office, there's two types of people. There are those who bring in bagels and those who eat the bagels that someone else brought in. Everybody likes the first person. Be that first person. Weekday mornings at 7:30, you have a chance to win a business box of bagels from Bagels & Joe. All you have to do is shut up, Sipple. 2 questions for you, 2 for Sip. Win, and the bagels are yours. Lose, well, you don't want to lose.
You lost Monday, you lost Wednesday, you're a loser.
Shut up, Sipple. Weekday mornings at 7:30, brought to you by Bagels & Joe.
1 in 3 adults has prediabetes. 1 in 3. That means it could be you, your football buddy, your football buddy, or you, your best man, your worst man, you, your dog walker, your cat jogger. While 1 in 3 adults has prediabetes, with early diagnosis, prediabetes can be reversed. Take the risk test at doihaveprediabetes.org. That's doihaveprediabetes.org.
Wait, did they just say 1 in 3 adults has prediabetes? That's 33.33333% of adults. That means it could be me, my boss, or my boss's boss, or me, my favorite sister, or my other sister. That's 7 members of my 21-person romantic book club. Wait, the 1 in 3 could be me, my karaoke partner Carol, or my karaoke enemy Jeff. I'm going to take the risk test at doihaveprediabetes.org.
Brought to you by the Ad Council and its pre-diabetes awareness partners.
All right, welcome back in. A second segment here of the Husker basketball postgame show. They take down Southern Jaguars, dominant fashion, 77-43. We got Austin Orman joining me as well. He was there down at PBA Live. And kind of to wrap this one up here, because we only got a little bit of time here, we got to talk about this defense, because it wasn't just this game. And we can say it's the Southern Jaguars, but this defense has been absolutely stellar all year long. It seems easy. Get it to the weak side. Don't let Nebraska just defend you and keep you all overloaded on one side. Teams can't, for whatever reason, they'll find a way to crack it consistently. Thoughts on the Huskers defense, and will this continue as the year goes on?
We'll certainly see. I mean, I think the offensive talent will go up from what Nebraska has seen. The game against Creighton is probably a good bellwether. Creighton had everyone available there. St. Mary's was a good offensive team as well. I don't think there's anyone that runs the style that, say, a South Dakota does when Nebraska gave up its fair amount of points. But here's the thing. Purdue's always efficient. This is going to be a challenge. Iowa, known for its offense, always going to be a pretty efficient group. Those are 2 of Nebraska's next 3 games. Rutgers, couple great individual scorers. Illinois, maybe the most unique schematic offense in the Big Ten. They do something not everyone else does. It's going to be a challenge for Nebraska to maintain it defensively. But here's the thing, Harrison. I think this team and its leadership is really bought into this defensive identity. Fred Hoiberg mentioned that it's not a pretty team, not a finesse team like last year. It's a gritty team. It's a dirty team, more like the one Juwan Gary's first year in Lincoln. Emmanuel Bandamel was on that team, Sam Griesel as well. I pulled up the Ken Pomeroy rankings right now. When I was downstairs, it had Nebraska as the number 13 defense in the country. I'm seeing Nebraska at number 9. Live on Ken Pom right now, which is just an incredible ranking for a program and a head coach that's never really been known for his defense. Let me get Bart Torvik pulled up here really quickly. It's my other go-to. Scroll down. Nebraska now up to number 28 at Bart Torvik with the number 8 defense in the country. And one more just for kicks. Let's see if we can get Evan Miyakawa pulled up here pretty quickly. Let's see. Team ratings. Evan Miyakawa, Nebraska in the top 50 with him with a defensive rating of 10, which is very high. That's definitely a top 20 mark. Wait, here it is. It's
you're killing me. So. We got the audio blip at the worst second there. What was that one more time?
Nebraska number 23 in defensive efficiency and Evan Miyakawa. So a really good defense by any stretch of the imagination, probably a top 15 unit right now. I still have my own questions about it, in that Nebraska doesn't really protect the rim a whole lot, even with a guy like Braxton Mia not blocking a whole lot of shots as their defensive rating would maybe lead you to believe. Not necessarily a whole lot of on-ball pressure and steals from the starting lineup. Williams can, Gary can, Wooster here and there, Bouygues active. Nebraska's not really a havoc-causing defense, kind of like football, right? I don't think bend but don't break applies here. Nebraska's defense is just so fundamentally sound, does a good job of helping recover, pretty good communication tonight, all things considered. So I don't think Nebraska is going to, dominate a game in the traditional sense of there's just no access to the paint, or these guys can't even get the ball across half court because of ball pressure. Nebraska is just such a fundamentally sound defense that knows its rotations, that communicates pretty well, and is really long. There's not a lot of space in the half court just because Nebraska has a bunch of big dudes. Wooster 6'4", Gary 6'6", Williams 6'7", Bouygues at 6'9" or 6'10", and then Mia at 7'1", with I think all of them have at least even or plus wingspans. Esigen's not small, not a great defender, but you bring Andrew Morgan with some length off the bench. He returns as well. So I think Nebraska's defense probably slips back a little bit, but I still think this is a top top 6 at the very least defense in the Big Ten. And if it's a top 3 defense in the Big Ten like it is right now, this team has a real chance to make some noise in the conference race.
Absolutely. And yeah, I mean, that's going to be the real challenge is like, if you want to use the example of last year, like what happens when you run into a team like Texas A&M who wants to go downhill, who, yeah, it's not a super complicated offense to figure out, but the style which they play is just constantly downhill, and you got some size there. You give credit to Burkett, or you know, being one of the better help defenders in the Big Ten right now. I think his strength is kind of reminds me of Draymond Green a little bit. On ball, he's good, but where he's really good to me, he's just really good off those rotations. I'm understanding where he needs to be on that help side defense.
I will tell you that is an incredible comparison for you to make, because I see where you're coming from. It cracks me up because Draymond's thing is antics and he's so focused and locked in on the defensive end. Bearcat can float sometimes, right? He really does float. He's kind of a space cadet doing his own thing. But when it's time for him to lock in, he locks in. He is good off ball. He is pretty solid on the ball as well. And another piece of this defense for Nebraska off the bench is Aaron Eulis. My dad texts in on our Starter Human Jewelers text line, how long until Aaron Eulis comes back? Fred Hoiberg said in the postgame press conference, he's, quote, making progress, end quote. He'll do some non-contact stuff and maybe get into some light individual drills as well with a sprained ankle that he suffered, I believe, as the team got out to Hawaii. He's been in the boot for a while. So my guess is we don't see Aaron Eulis any earlier than the road game at Iowa. I would probably shoot for the Purdue game in Mackey Arena as a return for him.
Yeah, and that kind of goes back to the very beginning. You know, you look at Bryce Williams, 5 turnovers. He was playing a lot of that point guard position today. Obviously, you still got Wooster, but Bryce Williams takes his fair share of taking over that role with Eulis being out. And he's really good at finding those post entries, but there was a few times today where you saw his picket get blocked, or his pocket get picked. And again, I think you get Eulis back, it'll take a little bit more off playmaking. Let Bryce Williams work off the ball more. But Bryce Williams, he's so good that you kind of feel comfortable with him, but it's just another thing where it's not something you necessarily need him to do unless you really have a set you want to dial in with him bringing the ball up the court. Final thoughts here as we're kind of wrapping things up here, Orman. Sounds like we're one song away from them playing closing time down there.
That's pretty much what we're going on. Nick Janowski getting in his typical post-game shooting regimen on the floor, this time in front of the Nebraska bench. I think he's shifted sides of the court. Closing thoughts, good win for Nebraska. An 11-2 stretch to start the year is fantastic. 10-1, I should say, in the non-conference. Here's the thing, Harrison, from the Nebraska game notes, Nebraska's 10-2 record going into the game matches Nebraska's best 12-game mark since the 1994-95 season when they went 11-1. Nebraska's also been 10-2 on just 5 other occasions: 2003, 2004, 2007, 2008, 2010, 2011, 2018-19, the last year for Tim Miles. And then last year they did it, 2023-24. So I think to the point that we ended off the first segment of postgame with, is it the most impressive non-conference strength of schedule? No, it's in the 200s. But I think Nebraska expected another bigger name out in Hawaii, which is why they took that tournament. We haven't seen Nebraska schedule a team as good as St. Mary's on a neutral court for a while. Maybe the game against Kansas State a couple of years ago, but I think that was a sneaky good Kansas State team that Nebraska didn't know it was getting itself into. Obviously, handled business against Creighton on the road. That's an annual game there. So, no, Nebraska didn't exactly play murderer's row. It wasn't exactly the best non-conference slate, but we have seen Nebraska get tripped up in non-conferences before. I think coming out of this at 8-5, 9-4, even 10-3 would have felt a little, you're not feeling great about it. But Nebraska's 2 losses were to, St. Mary's. Obviously, that's a really good tournament caliber team. And I think if they play that game 10 times, that's a 5-5 series. And then Michigan State, who that's a team, like you mentioned, maybe a little more explosive on the perimeter. They're definitely guard dominated. They don't have their front court figured out, whereas Nebraska's probably the opposite. Even if Bryce Williams is a shooting guard, I still think he's more of a 2.5 or a 3 than a pure 2. And that could just be me. But explosive guards, I think, will still give this team problems. There's just not a lot of them. Dylan Harper's going to be good. I think Jack Ashonas from Illinois is good, but a better matchup for Nebraska. Same with Braden Smith. So I think Nebraska has seen a good mix of styles, the athleticism of Southern, the speed of South Dakota. Bethune-Cookman here and there. You saw some bruising type of teams like Oregon State in the championship game. Hawaii and Murray State were definitely interesting tests for Nebraska as well. So I think what Nebraska did was position itself pretty well for the Big Ten, right? They're in the same spot as last year, 1 non-conference loss, 1-1 in the conference, losing on the road, winning at home. And now it's mix and match time, right? Get the rotation figured out as soon as you can. I think roles are pretty well figured out. Now it's just up to these guys to play a full 40 minutes in Big Ten, play 18 more times before the conference tournament, and see where the chips fall.
Absolutely. And we do know one thing about the Big Ten. That's plenty of good competition left ahead for you to go ahead and continue to push this program in the right direction. But that's going to wrap it up for us. Like we said here, Nebraska wins it. They beat Southern 77-43. Do it comfortably. Shout out to Austin Orman for giving us the coverage out there. We'll play Hell Varsity on the way out. Have a great rest of your night. That's going to do it for us.